My hand was shaking as I sat watching him marry another woman. The positive pregnancy test was tucked away in my pocket, a warm secret I had been carrying for a while now. It was just 7 months ago that he had called me a manipulative liar when I told him I was pregnant with our child. "You're just trying to trap me," he had said, his voice cold and sharp. His family's business empire was like a huge fortress behind him, and he was safe inside it. He had no idea that as flower petals fell over him and his new bride, I was carrying the real heir to his family's fortune. I quietly left the church, one hand resting on my growing stomach. I was already dialing my lawyer's number. Sometimes, the biggest revenge comes in the smallest of packages. I sat in the back row of the Grand Cathedral, feeling uncomfortable. I pulled at the loose navy dress that covered my 7-month pregnant belly. The enormous arrangements of white roses and lilies probably cost more than what I paid for rent in a month, and their strong scent made it hard to breathe. Or maybe it was just the baby pressing up against my lungs. Alex Sterling's wedding to Isabella Vance was the biggest social event of the year, with security that was tighter than a presidential visit. But here I was, Clara Evans, not invited and very pregnant, watching the man who had left me marry a woman who was his social equal. The cathedral was filled with the city's most important people, politicians, celebrities, and business leaders, all wearing their best clothes. I had managed to get inside by blending in with a group of distant relatives. My old employee ID and an old invitation were enough to get me past the junior security guards. Now, I was sitting behind a large stone pillar, holding my purse tightly. Inside, it was the proof that would soon destroy the perfect world Alex had built for himself. The music for the wedding march started, and everyone stood up. I stayed in my seat, using the moment to catch my breath. Isabella appeared at the end of the aisle, looking stunning in a designer white dress. Her father, the famous banking tycoon Robert Vance, looked incredibly proud as he walked her down the aisle. As I watched Isabella walk gracefully, my mind went back to the night I first met Alex. Sterling Development Group was celebrating its biggest project of the year, a new environmentally friendly building that I had designed. I was 28 years old, had just been promoted to senior architect, and was proudly showing off the small model of the building. A deep voice from behind me said, "You've somehow made concrete look almost beautiful." I was annoyed by the backhanded compliment and turned around to see the most captivating blue eyes I had ever seen. Alex Sterling, the heir to the development company, was standing there in a perfectly fitted suit with a confident smile on his face. I responded to him right away. "I'd like to see you do better." Instead of getting offended, he laughed, a real laugh that made a few people turn their heads. "I deserve that," he said. "Let me buy you dinner to make up for it." That was the start of our fast-paced romance, a successful architect falling for the son of the company's owner. It felt like a modern-day fairy tale. If only I had noticed the warning signs, the way he always insisted on paying for everything, the way he would gently criticize my simple clothes, and how his compliments always seemed to have a little bit of correction in them. The minister's voice brought me back to the present. "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." My heart was beating like a drum. This was the part in the movies where the wronged woman stands up, dramatically reveals she's pregnant, and everything turns to chaos. My hand automatically went to my stomach, where our daughter, I had recently found out I was having a girl, kicked, as if she was telling me to say something. I stayed quiet. Alex didn't deserve a big scene. His new wife didn't deserve to be publicly humiliated, whether she knew about me or not. And my daughter definitely didn't deserve to be introduced to the world with a scandal. My phone vibrated in my purse. It was a text from my doctor, Dr. Chen. "Your blood pressure readings from your home monitor are concerning. Can you come in tomorrow instead of Thursday? Come in earlier if you can." The cathedral suddenly felt too small and stuffy. Alex and Isabella were exchanging rings now. His voice was clear and strong as he promised to love another woman forever. These were the same promises he had whispered to me in our apartment just 8 months ago. I had come here looking for some kind of closure, thinking I needed to see this happen to finally move on. But sitting here, feeling my daughter move inside me while watching Alex's performance, I realized I had already moved on. I moved on the moment he called me a liar, threw my prenatal vitamins across our kitchen, and accused me of getting pregnant just to trap him when his family's company was in financial trouble. That was the real end of our story. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister announced. The sound of applause filled the church as Alex kissed his bride. I used the noise as a distraction to stand up and walk towards a side exit. My doctor's text was more important than watching Alex's fake smile for another minute. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the wedding invitation I had kept as proof of our relationship fell out of my purse. Before I could pick it up, a woman about my age, dressed as a bridesmaid, picked it up for me. "You dropped this," she said, her eyes kind. "Keep it," I told her. "I don't need it anymore." Something in my voice made her look at me more closely. Her eyes got wider when she saw my pregnant belly. "Are you okay? Do you need help getting somewhere?" The real concern in her voice almost made me cry. It had been months since anyone other than my doctor had been so kind to me. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, with a small smile, showing her I was ready to leave the past behind. She glanced towards the altar where Alex was walking down the aisle with a look of victory on his face. She turned back to me, and it seemed like she was starting to understand the situation. "I'm Emily," she whispered, and quickly put a business card in my hand. "Call me if you need anything. Seriously." I was about to say something back when Alex's mother came over. Her sharp eyes narrowed when she saw Emily talking to a stranger. "They're taking photos, Emily," she said, her voice commanding. She wanted her to follow without even looking at me. I quietly slipped out the door and into the bright spring afternoon. The difference between the quiet, serious cathedral and the busy city street outside was a bit disorienting. A black car, the kind Alex's family always used, pulled up to the curb. I instinctively stepped back into the shadows of this doorway. It was in that moment that I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't here for drama, revenge, or even closure. I was here to prove to myself that Alex Sterling was just a fake, a handsome man who was really a coward on the inside. I didn't need to ruin his wedding to win. All I needed to do was build a life so good that his absence wouldn't matter at all. I took out my phone and called my lawyer as I walked away from the cathedral, away from Alex, and away from a life I once thought I wanted. "Mr. Davies, it's Clara. I'm ready to file everything." "Yes, all of it. The paternity lawsuit, the wrongful termination claim, everything." I stopped at the corner and watched as the wedding guests came out onto the steps for pictures. "No, I don't need to wait any longer. I have all the proof we need." I gently rubbed my belly and felt my daughter kick again. It was time for her father to learn that some traps are the ones you make for yourself. 18 months before the wedding, I was standing in the middle of a room with a large-scale model, making small changes to my architectural design for the Horizon project. My fingers were shaking a little as I moved a tiny tree next to the miniature apartment complex. After working for 3 years at Sterling Development Group, this was my big chance. It was my first project as the main architect. "Miss Evans, they're ready for you in the presentation room," my assistant Zach whispered. He looked both excited and nervous, which was probably how I looked too. I smoothed down my charcoal-colored skirt, checked my shirt for any pencil marks, and took a deep breath. The model looked perfect. It was modern but practical, looked good, and wasn't too expensive. This design could really change people's lives. It was affordable housing with green spaces, community centers, and lots of natural light in every apartment. It hadn't been easy to convince the company's board to focus on these things, but the financial numbers were on my side. The presentation went better than I could have hoped. By the time I was done, even Harold Sterling, the founder of the company who was known for being very careful with money, was nodding his head in approval. When the board voted yes on the project, the CEO herself shook my hand and said, "Clara, you've just made Sterling Development a leader in sustainable architecture." The party that evening at a trendy rooftop bar was amazing. Coworkers who had barely talked to me before now wanted to chat. My best friend Sarah kept bringing me champagne and telling everyone, "My friend just changed the world of affordable housing." I laughed at how much she was exaggerating, but I could see the pride in her eyes. "Your friend is being too modest," a deep voice said from behind me. I turned around and was surprised to see a man at the party who was actually talking about the technical side of my design. He was tall with dark hair that looked perfectly messy and amazing blue eyes. His expensive suit showed he was wealthy, but his smile was warm and genuine. I didn't think the executives at Sterling paid much attention to those kinds of details, I said, taking a sip of my champagne to hide my surprise. They probably don't, he admitted with a wink. But I'm trying to change that. He held out his hand and introduced himself as Alex Sterling. The champagne suddenly felt a lot stronger. Everyone knew the founder's son had just come back from Europe to work for the family business, but I had never met him before. Clara Evans, I said, shaking his hand. And I know who you are. And yet you're not trying desperately to impress me. That's refreshing, he said with a grin that made him seem more friendly. He asked me what inspired the rooftop gardens since they weren't the most cost-effective idea. What started as a conversation about work turned into hours of talking. Alex knew a lot about sustainable design and was very passionate about it. He was also surprisingly funny. He told me a story about how he tried to grow tomatoes on his apartment balcony and they ended up looking like sad red golf balls. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my drink. By midnight, we were the last two people at the bar, sitting close together, as he showed me pictures of amazing architecture from Copenhagen. When he asked for my phone number, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our first date was at a small, hidden restaurant where the chef knew Alex by name. For our second date, he surprised me with a trip to a local art gallery. He then took me to a community garden in a neighborhood that had been neglected. I thought you might like to see how green spaces can really make a difference, he explained. He was so enthusiastic as we walked past plots of vegetables where children and older residents were working together, their laughter mixed with the sound of the leaves in the wind. By our fifth date, I was completely falling for him. Alex wasn't like the other rich, privileged men I had met. He really listened when I told him about growing up in a small apartment with my single mother. He would nod thoughtfully and look at me intently as I explained how those experiences made me want to design homes that helped families grow. That's why your designs have so much warmth, he said one evening, squeezing my hand across the dinner table. You're not just drawing rooms, you're creating homes. 6 months into our relationship, Alex gave me a key to his penthouse apartment. I want to wake up next to you every day, he whispered, his warm breath on my neck. It was a sign that we were moving from just spending weekends together to sharing a life. Moving in with him happened slowly. First, I left a toothbrush, then some clothes, and finally, my favorite books. Alex's apartment was very modern with a lot of chrome, glass, and white leather furniture. My colorful pillows and quirky bookends looked out of place in his minimalist home. One evening, he looked at my collection of ceramic owls on his perfect coffee table and said, "Maybe my interior designer should help you find a way to make your things fit in better." I laughed it off and said the owls weren't exactly corporate art, but I moved them to the spare bedroom. It felt like a small thing to give up. After all, his apartment was much nicer than my old rental, and the huge windows let in a lot of natural light, which was perfect for my weekend sketching. The first 6 months were perfect. Alex would bring me coffee in bed, leave me encouraging notes when he traveled for work, and tell all his friends how great my design projects were. If he sometimes interrupted me to correct a small detail or suggested I replace my favorite old sweater with something more fashionable, I barely noticed. I started seeing my friends less and less as my life became filled with Alex's busy schedule of charity events and corporate dinners. "You've changed," my friend Sarah said during one of the few times we had lunch together. "You used to be more full of life, more yourself." I was annoyed by what she said and told her it was nonsense. "I'm just growing up, learning how to fit into Alex's world," I said. But deep down, I knew I was changing. I was carefully avoiding topics that made Alex tense up, wearing the fancy clothes he liked, and toning down my laughter at public events. It seemed like a fair trade, especially when he would whisper how proud he was of me and talk about our future together. By our first anniversary, I was a part of Alex's life. My old independent routines were just a memory. My career was doing great because of his support, and I had gotten several big projects. Our relationship had become comfortable and predictable. When he proposed during a private dinner on his yacht, I said yes without even thinking about it. But there was a dark cloud over our happy life. Alex's family. His mother, Victoria, always looked at me like I was a science experiment, her eyes full of criticism. His father only spoke to me briefly about work-related things. Only his younger brother, Daniel, was genuinely friendly. One time, after having a few drinks, he told me, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to Alex. He's becoming a better person because of you." 2 months after we got engaged, I started feeling tired and nauseous all the time. At first, I thought it was just a stomach bug, but then I had lunch with Sarah, and she asked me when my last period was. A home pregnancy test confirmed what she was thinking. At first, I was overwhelmed, but then I felt incredibly happy. Alex and I hadn't talked specifically about having kids, but he had mentioned wanting a family someday. I wanted to surprise him, so I bought a small silver picture frame engraved with "Baby Sterling coming soon" and put it next to his plate at dinner. But when he came home that night, he was in a bad mood, worried about a business deal in Beijing that was going wrong. I decided it wasn't the right time to tell him my news, so I put off the announcement. The next day, I quietly put a bottle of prenatal vitamins in our bathroom cabinet and went to work. When I got home, Alex was waiting for me. He was holding the bottle of vitamins, and his face was cold and unreadable. "What is this?" he asked, his voice like ice. I was flustered by how angry he sounded and managed to stammer, "I was going to tell you last night. I'm pregnant, Alex. We're going to have a baby." His reaction was terrifying. His laugh was bitter and sounded like it belonged to a stranger. "How convenient," he sneered. "The company is facing its first financial crisis in years, and now you're pregnant. Is this your way of making sure you're set for life with the Sterling name?" I was confused and hurt and took a step back, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I hadn't planned for this to happen. His accusations felt like a dark cloud over what should have been a happy moment. His words hurt me like they were physical blows. This couldn't be happening. Not from Alex, the man who had held me all night when I lost a big project, the man who knew all of my dreams and fears. "You think I got pregnant to trap you?" My voice sounded strange, even to me. "I think your timing is a little too perfect," he shot back. He threw the vitamin bottle against the wall and it shattered, sending pink pills all over the clean floor. "We're not ready for a child. Take care of it." In that moment, Alex's handsome face changed right in front of me. I saw past his smooth charm, his calculated kindness, and the subtle control that I had thought was real love. Most of all, I saw a complete stranger, not the man I had agreed to marry. "There's nothing to take care of," I said quietly, feeling a new sense of strength despite the shock. "This is our child." Alex's phone rang, and he answered it right away. His voice changed to a professional tone as he started talking about business, completely ignoring me. He walked into his office and shut the door. I knelt on the cold floor and started picking up the scattered vitamins, my vision blurry from tears. How had I been so blind to who he really was for so long? The Sterling family's meeting room felt as cold as a morgue, even though the spring sun was shining through the huge windows that looked out over the city Alex's ancestors had helped build. I sat by myself at one side of the long mahogany table, my back straight and my hands folded over my still flat stomach. Across from me, the Sterling family sat together like a solid wall. Harold and Victoria were in the middle, with Alex to their right. Daniel, Alex's younger brother, was at the far end, looking down at the table. Victoria spoke first, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a rhythm on the table. "Clara, this situation is unfortunate, but it can be fixed." She pushed a folded piece of paper across the polished wood towards me. My hands were steady as I opened it. The numbers jumped out at me. $250,000 to disappear from their lives and take care of the problem, as the document so coldly put it. "You want me to have an abortion?" I asked, looking directly at Alex, but he quickly looked away. "We're offering you a very generous solution," Harold said, his voice as commanding as it was in board meetings. "Alex's engagement to Isabella Vance is a very important business partnership. A pregnancy just makes things complicated." "Complicates things?" I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. "We are talking about your grandchild here." Victoria's perfectly painted lips formed a tight smile. "My dear, let's be realistic. You're a career woman with big goals. A child would only slow you down, especially without the right support. We're just offering you freedom and some money. I turned to Alex, hoping to see a sign of the man who had once loved me. Don't you have anything to say? What is there to say? Alex's voice was flat. We made a mistake. My parents are offering a reasonable solution. The word mistake hung in the air. 8 months of living together, a year and a half of what I thought was love, all reduced to a mistake. I carefully folded the document back up. I won't be accepting your offer, and I will not have an abortion. Harold's face got darker. Then you leave us no choice. We will have to protect our interests in other ways. I stood up, my dignity my only defense. I expected this meeting to be hard, but I didn't expect all of you to be so cruel, especially you, Alex. As I got to the door, Daniel finally looked up. I saw a hint of recognition, or maybe regret, in his eyes before he looked away again. The next morning at Sterling Development Group, I knew something was wrong as soon as I got off the elevator. Conversations stopped. People who usually said hello to me suddenly got very busy with their phones or papers on their desks. The door to my office was open, and inside, David Cooper, the head of HR, was packing my personal things into a box. What's going on? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. David wouldn't look at me. I'm sorry, Clara. The Beijing project has been canceled and we're reorganizing some departments. Your position has been eliminated. Reorganizing? I said, my voice hollow. And what about my other projects? They've been given to other people. You'll get 3 months of severance pay. Of course. Just enough time to make it look like they were being fair while making sure I couldn't afford to stay in the city once the money ran out. There was no use in arguing. The decision had been made at that same mahogany table. As I walked out with my box of belongings, Lisa Reeves, who used to be my closest friend at work, walked past me in the hallway without saying a word. She looked around nervously before whispering, I heard they're saying you misused client information. Nobody believes it, but nobody is going to stand up to the Sterlings. I got the message. As I walked home, it started to rain, soaking through my thin blazer. The doorman's face looked sad when he saw me coming. Miss Evans, I'm so sorry, he started, his eyes full of real sympathy. Let me guess. I'm not allowed to come in anymore, I asked. He nodded sadly. Mr. Sterling had the locks changed this morning. He pointed to a few cardboard boxes that were piled up in the corner of the lobby. 2 years of my life, all packed into 5 medium-sized boxes. My architecture books, my clothes, my ceramic owls. One of them now had a broken wing. I stood there, dripping water on the marble floor. Suddenly, being homeless was a real possibility, not just something I worried about. The doorman put an umbrella in my hand. Take it, he said in a low voice. Mrs. Peterson in 5B asked me to give you her number if you came by. She said she might have a solution for you. Judith Peterson was a widow in her 70s who lived down the hall from Alex's penthouse. We had become friends over her stories about being one of the first female stockbrokers on Wall Street in the 1970s. She had always refused Alex's offers to help her with her groceries, saying, I'm not dead yet. 2 hours later, I was sitting in her cluttered apartment, sipping chamomile tea in a borrowed robe that smelled like lavender. Bastards, she said after I told her my story. Rich boys never change. My second husband was just like that. Charming until he wasn't. I don't know what to do, I admitted. The events of the day were finally hitting me, and I felt overwhelmed. I'm pregnant, I don't have a job, and I'm apparently homeless, all in one day. You'll stay in my guest room until you figure things out, she said, with the same authority she probably used to use in boardrooms. The Sterling family thinks their money can buy them anything. It makes me sick. That night, curled up on Mrs. Peterson's floral guest bed, I felt the full weight of my situation. My career, the one I had worked so hard to build, was destroyed. My reputation was being ruined. My savings would only last for 3 months at best. And inside me, a child was growing who would need a stable home, care, and money that I suddenly didn't have. I let myself cry for one night, sobbing into a pillow that smelled like mothballs and old perfume. Then, I made a plan. The next morning, I started calling every architecture firm in the city. By the afternoon, it was clear what was happening. No one was hiring, especially not someone who had just mysteriously left Sterling Development Group. The next week was even harder. I was climbing the stairs to Mrs. Peterson's apartment after another unsuccessful interview when I suddenly felt dizzy. The world started to spin, and the stairs became a blur. I grabbed the railing, but I still fell, sliding down several steps before I stopped at the landing. The hospital emergency room was bright and sterile. A kind nurse took my blood pressure, frowned, and immediately called for a doctor. Hypertension and dehydration, the doctor explained later. It's common in pregnancy, but it's concerning in your case. Have you been under a lot of stress lately? I laughed until I started to cry. When I finally caught my breath, the doctor ordered an ultrasound to make sure the baby was okay. I was alone in the dark examination room, holding my breath as the technician moved the wand over my stomach. The room was filled with a fast whooshing sound. My baby's heartbeat, strong and steady. On the screen, I could see a tiny shape, which looked like an alien but was clearly a human. Would you like to know the sex? The technician asked. I nodded, desperate for one piece of solid information in my chaotic life. It's a girl. A daughter. Alex's cruel words. Take care of it, echoed in my mind. This wasn't an it. This was our daughter. I felt a fierce wave of protectiveness wash over me. Everything looks healthy, the technician continued. She's growing right on schedule. As I was getting ready to leave, I saw a familiar face in the doorway. It was Emily, the same woman who would later be a bridesmaid at Alex's wedding. She was wearing scrubs and looked surprised. Clara, I thought that was you on the patient list. You work here? I asked, confused. I'm a pediatric nurse. We met at the Sterling Christmas party last year. Her eyes moved to my chart and then back to my face with a new understanding. You're pregnant, I admitted, suddenly feeling cautious. Does Alex know you work here? Alex? Her confusion seemed real. Oh, no. I'm friends with Daniel. We went to college together. She paused. Is everything okay? You're here alone, and your emergency contact is listed as Judith Peterson, not Alex. There was something so honest about her concern that it broke through my defenses. Alex and I aren't together anymore. He doesn't want the baby. Emily's professional calm broke for a moment. That complete ass, she muttered, and then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that was unprofessional. But accurate, I said, managing a small smile. She wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. This is my personal number. Call me if you need anything. A ride to an appointment, someone to talk to, anything. That night, I was scrolling through social media before bed, a habit I had developed during my long, lonely evenings. I thought about the new friends I was making, each one a small sign of hope in a very difficult time. I hadn't been completely broken yet. Then, I froze. I saw Alex's face on a formal announcement from Sterling Development Group. Alex Sterling, Executive Vice President, had proposed to Isabella Vance, the daughter of the CEO of Vance Banking Group. The merger was being called an exciting synergy between two major companies. I looked at the date on the announcement. It had been posted just 3 weeks after I had told Alex I was pregnant. Isabella was wearing an elegant diamond ring that looked like it had been custom-made, the kind of ring that takes months to create. The realization hit me like a punch. He had been planning this all along. My pregnancy hadn't ruined his plans. It had just made him move faster. I hadn't just been dumped in a moment of panic. I had been strategically removed from his life. In that moment, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. This was about getting justice for me and for my daughter. You have a case, Mr. Davies said, adjusting his glasses as he looked over my documents. Actually, you have several cases, he corrected himself. The law office felt very formal, a big change from the weeks I had spent hiding out in Mrs. Peterson's apartment. I had found Mr. Davies through a university alumni group. He specialized in employment discrimination and family law, which made him the perfect person to help me. I've organized everything by date. I explained, pointing to the labeled tabs in my binder. Text messages, emails, employment records, medical bills. Mr. Davies nodded, looking pleased. Most clients bring me shoeboxes full of crumpled receipts. You've made my job easier, he said. He tapped the results of the prenatal paternity test. Smart move getting this done early. Non-invasive testing means there's no risk to the baby, but it gives us legally solid proof of paternity. Alex's blood type was rare, and when the doctor told me my baby had the same genetic marker, I knew that detail would be important. Mr. Davies looked at me thoughtfully. You've done your homework, but fighting with powerful families is exhausting, both emotionally and financially. The Sterlings will not make this easy for you. I didn't come here because I thought it would be easy, I replied, resting one hand on my growing belly. I came for justice. Good. Mr. Davies' smile was sharp. Now here's what we do. We wait. Wait for what? I asked, ready to argue. For Alex to marry Isabella Vance, he explained, holding up a hand to stop my protests. Trust me, once that merger, both the corporate one and the personal one, is official, your case becomes much stronger. Right now, the Sterlings could pressure Alex to marry you instead, to make a public show of doing the right thing while making your life miserable behind closed doors. He wouldn't marry me now if I were the last woman on earth, I scoffed, but his family might force him to protect their reputation. After the wedding, though, you become the wronged woman carrying the grandchild they rejected. The public will be on your side, and the Vances will be caught up in the scandal, which raises the stakes for everyone. I thought about his strategy. So we wait until after his wedding to file for paternity, child support, and the wrongful termination lawsuit? Don't forget that, Mr. Davies confirmed, closing his notebook. In the meantime, document everything, any contact, any threats, any rumors you hear about yourself, and find a more stable place to live. Mrs. Peterson's kindness is wonderful, but you need your own place before the baby arrives. As I left Mr. Davies' office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read, "We need to talk, not about getting back together, about the family." It was from Daniel Sterling. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Alex's younger brother in a quiet corner of a coffee shop far from the city center. Daniel looked tired and not as polished as the other Sterling men usually did. "Thank you for meeting me," he began awkwardly. "I know you have every reason not to trust my family right now." "Why am I here, Daniel?" I asked directly. He put a small thumb drive on the table between us. "Because you deserve to know that this isn't the first time this has happened." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. Daniel stared at his untouched coffee. "Did Alex ever tell you about our half-sister?" My confused look must have been all the answer he needed. "I didn't think so," he continued, pushing the drive closer to me. 28 years ago, my father had an affair with his assistant. She got pregnant. The Sterling family offered her money to go away. Unlike you, she took it." I picked up the drive, feeling cautious. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because history is repeating itself, and I'm tired of just watching it happen," Daniel said, finally looking at me. "These are copies of the original agreements, financial records of the payments they're still making, and photos of my half-sister, your daughter's aunt. She lives in Seattle now and has never met her father." "Does Alex know about this?" "He knows a version of the story. We were always taught to believe she was just a mistake our father had to deal with." Daniel's voice became bitter. "A mistake," named Angela, who graduated from UCLA and runs a successful graphic design company. The news was shocking. The Sterlings had been buying people's silence for generations, and they would probably try to do the same with me, using even more aggressive tactics. "There's something else you should know." Daniel hesitated. "The company is in trouble. Bigger trouble than they're letting on. The Vance merger isn't just a good idea. It's necessary for the company to survive." So, my pregnancy wasn't just a threat to Alex's relationship. It was a threat to the company's financial rescue plan. I finally understood. Daniel nodded as all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. "My brother isn't just a coward," he said. "He's a desperate one." "Be careful, Clara," Daniel warned as he left. I sat alone at the table, turning the thumb drive over in my hands. I was now aware of the deep, dark secrets of the Sterling family. For the first time, I had some power. This fight wasn't just about child support anymore. It was about taking down a family that had used its wealth to erase anyone they considered an inconvenience. The following week, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Peterson's neighbor, Paul Winters, a retired architect, found out about my situation and offered me some freelance work. He wanted me to redesign his daughter's restaurant. It's nothing fancy, he said, unrolling the current floor plans on Mrs. Peterson's dining table. But Sarah needs someone who can create a space that's both functional and has a nice atmosphere. Your portfolio is very impressive. The project was small, but it paid in cash, which was exactly what I needed. I threw myself into the work, creating a design that was efficient and beautiful, even with a tight budget. When Sarah saw my designs, she loved them and recommended me to her friends, who were starting a community art center in a neighborhood that didn't have many resources. By my 5th month of pregnancy, I had built a small but growing freelance business. The work kept my mind busy during the day, but at night I had trouble sleeping. My daughter was very active even at 3 a.m., and her kicks seemed to remind me of everything I was fighting for. During one of those sleepless nights, I started sketching a new idea: housing designed specifically for single parents. The designs had soundproofed bedrooms for sleeping babies, common areas for shared childcare, and play areas that were visible from the kitchen windows. The more I sketched, the more excited I felt. The next morning, full of energy from coffee and a burst of inspiration, I went to see Emily, who had become a good friend. I need a nurse's opinion, I explained, showing her my sketches on her kitchen table. Would these layouts actually work for parents with young children? Emily looked at the designs carefully and suggested some practical improvements, like wider doorways for strollers and built-in safety features. Her enthusiasm encouraged me, and for the first time in months, I felt like the architect I was before I met Alex: creative, purposeful, and alive. You should submit this to the Harlow Foundation's Urban Innovation Grant, Emily suggested. Their deadline is next month, and this is exactly the kind of project they support. I laughed at the idea at first. A pregnant, unemployed architect with no company backing her isn't exactly who they're looking for. But Emily insisted. That's exactly why you should apply. Your unique perspective is what makes this design so special. Encouraged by Emily's words, I started working on the grant application. It gave me a sense of purpose during my days, which were filled with freelance projects, doctor's appointments, and meetings with my lawyer. I developed my vision for what I called nest housing, a concept that addressed the specific challenges that single parents face. The day I submitted the application, Mrs. Peterson gave me a cream-colored envelope that had been delivered to her apartment. "It's thick and looks official," she said, looking at it suspiciously. Inside was an invitation to Alex and Isabella's wedding, addressed to Miss Clara Evans from Sterling Development Group. They hadn't even updated their employee records. There was a handwritten note from Victoria Sterling with the invitation. "Clara, Alex insists that we maintain a professional relationship, despite our personal differences. Your attendance is neither expected nor encouraged." The words didn't hurt as much as I thought they would, but what really caught my attention was the date. It was just 3 weeks away, which matched the fast timeline Mr. Davies had talked about. That evening, I called my lawyer. "I got a wedding invitation today," I told Mr. Davies. "Perfect," he replied. "This proves they're keeping up the act that you left for professional reasons and not because of discrimination." "I want to go," I added, a plan forming in my mind. After a pause, Mr. Davies questioned whether that was a good idea. "Not for a fight," I clarified, "for closure, and to get any last pieces of evidence before we file our case." Before he could argue, my phone beeped with another call. It was Daniel. "Clara, I need to warn you. Alex hired a private investigator to follow you. They're looking for anything they can use to ruin your reputation before any potential legal action." A cold anger settled over me. "Then we'll give them something to see." The weeks before the wedding were a blur. Mr. Davies prepared our legal documents while I finished my grant application and took on 2 more design projects. My body was changing quickly, and my daughter was growing stronger every day, a constant reminder of why I couldn't give up. Emily and Mrs. Peterson were my support system. Emily went to doctor's appointments with me when she could, and Mrs. Peterson's connections helped me find a small apartment in a safer neighborhood than I could have afforded on my own. It belongs to my niece, Mrs. Peterson explained as she gave me the keys. She's in Europe for a year and would rather have someone she trusts here than leave it empty. The apartment was small but had lots of sunlight, and the second bedroom was perfect for a nursery. On moving day, Emily showed up with paint samples and a determined look on her face. "Your daughter deserves a beautiful room," she said, "and you need a project that has nothing to do with the Sterlings." We spent the weekend turning the spare room into a nursery. We painted clouds on the ceiling and filled the bookshelves with children's classics that Emily had collected from hospital book drives. For the first time since I had left Alex's penthouse, I felt a spark of hope for the future I was fighting to create for my daughter and myself. I felt like I was home. As we stood back to admire our work, Emily, who had avoided the question for months, finally asked, "Have you decided on a name?" I rested my hands on my swollen belly, feeling my daughter's familiar kicks. "Lily," I said with certainty. "It means purity and beauty, something I hope she'll always have in her life." "Her mother is the strongest person I know," Emily replied quietly. "Lily will be lucky to have you." The night before Alex's wedding, I laid out my clothes. A simple navy dress that fit my 7-month pregnant belly but still looked dignified. Mr. Davies had arranged for a trusted colleague to go with me, for both emotional support and as a legal witness. My phone rang. It was Daniel again. "Clara, be careful tomorrow. Alex knows you got an invitation. He's convinced you're going to make some kind of scene." I laughed softly. The Sterlings always underestimate me. "Tell me something, Daniel. Does Isabella know about me? About the baby?" His hesitation was all the answer I needed. "She knows Alex had a serious girlfriend who became difficult. I don't think she knows the rest." "I see. Thank you for the warning." As I hung up, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge or public humiliation. It was about witnessing the end of one chapter so that another one could begin. A chapter where my daughter and I would write our own story, free from the toxic influence of the Sterling family. The morning after Alex's wedding was bright and clear. It was a perfect spring day that seemed to be mocking the storm that was brewing inside me. I sat in Mr. Davies's office, watching him organize documents into neat piles while his assistant made photocopies. "You're sure about this?" Mr. Davies asked, not for the first time. "Once we file, there's no turning back. The publicity alone will be huge." I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. Alex is on his honeymoon in the Maldives. Victoria and Harold are busy with post-wedding parties and merger announcements. They're distracted and feeling confident. It's the perfect time. Mr. Davies squared the edges of our legal complaint with a practiced hand. The paternity suit by itself would be a big story, but when you add the wrongful termination and discrimination claims, this becomes a story about corporate ethics. The timing with their merger announcement couldn't be worse for them. "They chose the timing, not me," I replied, remembering the cold, calculating look in Victoria's eyes when she had offered me the buyout. "They've had every chance to do the right thing." An hour later, it was done. We had filed 3 separate lawsuits against Alex personally and Sterling Development Group as a corporation. Mr. Davies's paralegal had already sent press kits to specific journalists who had covered corporate ethics cases before. By that evening, the story would be out. I stepped out of the law office and into the sunshine, one hand resting on my belly where Lily was kicking energetically. "It's done, little one," I whispered. "Now we can focus on our future, not their past." My phone buzzed with a notification. The Harlow Foundation wanted to interview me about my nest housing concept. The grant committee had some questions, but they were interested in my innovative approach to the challenges of single-parent housing. The interview was scheduled for the following week. It was perfect timing to distract me from whatever media storm our lawsuits might create. By nightfall, the story had, in fact, broken. "Sterling abandons pregnant fiancée weeks before Vance merger," screamed one headline. "Architect claims pregnancy discrimination at city's largest developer," read another. My phone was flooded with messages from former colleagues, distant acquaintances, and even college classmates I hadn't talked to in years. I turned it off, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and focused on finishing my presentation for the Harlow Foundation. Let the Sterlings deal with the press. I had a future to build. 3 days into the media frenzy, Emily showed up at my apartment, her eyes wide. "Have you seen this?" she asked, holding up her tablet. It was open to a business news website. The headline made my heart skip a beat. Vance banking questions Sterling merger amid ethics concerns. Isabella's father is reportedly furious that they weren't told about the pending paternity suit before the wedding, Emily explained. Sources say he's reconsidering the terms of the merger, and he might even pull out completely. I should have felt triumphant, or at least satisfied, but instead I felt strangely empty. This was never about destroying their business, I said quietly. It was just about getting justice for Lily. "Well, you might get both," Emily replied, putting down her tablet to help me organize fabric samples for the Harlow presentation. "Daniel called me this morning. He says the office is in chaos. Alex is flying back early from his honeymoon." I had just opened my mouth to say something when a sharp knock rattled my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw a face I had hoped I would never see again. It was Alex. He was still tan from his interrupted tropical vacation, and his face was a mixture of fury and something that looked almost like fear. "I know you're in there, Clara," he said, his voice loud. He knocked again, harder this time. "We need to talk, now." Against my better judgment, I opened the door, but I kept the security chain on. "My lawyer advised me not to speak with you directly," I told him. "Lawyer?" he scoffed. "Is that what this is about? Money? How much will it take for you to drop these ridiculous lawsuits and stop ruining my life?" I was so stunned by his audacity that I couldn't speak for a moment. Emily stepped up behind me. "You should leave, Alex. Clara has nothing to say to you." His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Then realization dawned on his face. "You've been helping her all along, haven't you? Does my brother know his college buddy is betraying our family?" "Daniel knows exactly where my loyalties are," Emily replied coldly. "Now leave before I call the police." "This isn't over," Alex hissed, pointing a finger at me. "You think you've won? You think anyone will hire you after I'm done with you? You're nothing without the Sterling name, Clara. Nothing." An unexpected laugh bubbled up in my throat. "That's where you're wrong, Alex. I was something long before I met you, and I'll be something long after you're gone. You're just an unfortunate chapter in my life." As I started to close the door, I added, "Oh, and by the way, your daughter's name is Lily. Not that you asked." The door clicked shut, leaving him standing there with a stunned look on his face. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, until Emily's gentle hand on my shoulder guided me to the couch. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded, surprised to realize that I was. Actually, yes," I said. "For the first time in months, I think I really am." The Harlow Foundation interview the following week went better than I could have ever hoped. The committee was especially interested in the psychological research I had used in my design, how the layout of the space could encourage a sense of community while still respecting people's privacy, and how thoughtful architecture could make the practical challenges of single parenthood easier. "Miss Evans," the committee chair said as we were finishing up, "your personal experience has clearly informed this design in powerful ways. We'd like to invite you to the final selection round, which will include a public presentation next month." I felt like I was floating on a cloud as I left their offices. My work, not my connection to the Sterlings, not my personal drama, had earned me this opportunity. On the sidewalk outside, I almost ran into Natalie Winters, the famous architect whose firm had rejected my job applications twice after I left Sterling. "Clara," she said, stopping as she recognized me. I prepared myself for an awkward conversation, but her smile seemed genuine. "I've been following your situation with interest. That took a lot of courage." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "I also saw your name on the Harlow shortlist," she said, handing me her business card. "When you're ready to go back to work at a firm, after your maternity leave, of course, I'd like to talk to you about some possibilities. Your housing concepts are a perfect fit for our new community development division." The job market, which had seemed completely closed off to me, was suddenly starting to open up. By the end of the week, I had gotten 3 more inquiries from firms that had previously ignored my applications. Mr. Davies called with updates on settlement offers from Sterling Development. Each one was higher than the last, and each one was rejected because it wasn't enough. They're getting desperate, he explained. The Vance merger is about to fall apart, and their stock is down 15%. We have the upper hand now. 2 weeks after we filed the lawsuits, Daniel asked for a meeting. He came to the neutral coffee shop Mr. Davies had chosen, looking both exhausted and determined. I've been put in charge of negotiations for the family, he explained. My father had a minor heart episode last week. It was stress-related. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want Harold to suffer. Daniel slid a folder across the table. This is our final offer. Full financial support for Lily through college. Your old position at the company back, or an equivalent severance package. A public acknowledgement of paternity and, he hesitated, a formal apology. I looked over the documents carefully. The financial terms are acceptable. The job is unnecessary. I've accepted a partnership offer somewhere else. But the apology needs to be more specific. Not just for the pregnancy discrimination, but for the deliberate campaign to ruin my professional reputation. Daniel nodded, taking notes. There's something else, he said. He reached into his briefcase and took out a small velvet box. This belonged to our grandmother. Alex was going to give it to Isabella before everything fell apart. I think it should go to Lily as a reminder that she does have family, even if some of us took too long to act like it. Inside was a delicate gold locket with the Sterling family crest, a family heirloom that was meant to be passed down through the generations. Daniel, Please, he interrupted. I'm not asking for a relationship now. Just for the possibility that someday when she's older, Lily might know that there was at least one Sterling who wanted to do the right thing by her from the beginning. The settlement was finalized 3 days later. Alex's acknowledgement of paternity and the company's admission of wrongdoing made the news, but the headlines were smaller than the ones from the initial scandal. By then, I was focused on other things. The Harlow presentation, setting up my new office at Winters Architecture, and getting ready for Lily's birth. She arrived 2 weeks early on a stormy summer night. Emily held my hand through 15 hours of labor while Mrs. Peterson paced in the waiting room, bothering the nurses for updates. When the doctor finally placed my daughter in my arms, 7 pounds of perfection with a full head of dark hair and eyes that would later turn my own shade of amber, the world seemed to stop for a moment, acknowledging that everything had changed. Hello, Lily, I whispered, counting her tiny fingers. We made it. I could see traces of Alex in her features, of the Sterling family line that was continuing, despite their best efforts to stop it. But I could also see myself, my mother, my own determination reflected back at me in miniature. Lily would grow up knowing she was loved unconditionally, surrounded by strength and resilience. She was wanted, chosen, and fought for, not an inconvenient mistake to be gotten rid of with a check. 1 year later, I was standing in the front yard of our new home, a modest but beautifully designed house that I had drawn up myself. I had incorporated everything I had learned about creating supportive spaces for single parents. The Harlow grant had paid for the prototype of the Nest Community Housing Project, which was now being built across town. My partnership at Winters Architecture gave me the flexibility to be a mother and do meaningful work. Lily, who was now taking her first wobbly steps across the grass, had the security and love that I had fought so hard to give her. As I watched her toddle towards me, her arms outstretched and her face full of joy, I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. A black car was slowing down at the end of our driveway. Through the tinted window, I could see Alex's profile. He looked older and maybe a little more worn down after a year of legal battles, a divorce, and corporate problems. Our eyes met for a moment. He looked at Lily for a long time, perhaps realizing what he had given up. I didn't wave or do anything more than just acknowledge him. After a few seconds, the car drove on and disappeared around the corner. I turned back to my daughter and clapped as she made it into my open arms. Behind us, construction workers were putting in the final window in my home office. It was a huge wall of glass that looked out over the backyard play area, which I had designed specifically so I could work and still keep an eye on Lily as she explored her world. We did it, little one, I whispered into her soft hair. We built something better than what we lost. As if she agreed, Lily patted my cheek with her dimpled hand. Her smile was all the victory I would ever need. The Sterling name might have once opened doors for us, but it was our own resilience that had built this new life, a life where the past couldn't define or hurt us. Outside the window, the foundation was being poured for the first phase of the nest. It was tangible proof that sometimes, the very things that are meant to destroy us can instead become the raw materials we use to build our most amazing achievements.